All right, hey, it's Rob, and I'm here as always with my buddy Diego. Can you come up here and say hello? Hey, can you do it? He's not having it. Anyway, take my word for it, he's here. So as the plane flies over, as they always do, I'm going to start a new series where I am talking about the multi-disc reissues of my favorite band, I am proud to say, China Crisis. And over the last couple of years, they've had these multi-disc set reissues. I am maybe one of the handful of fans in the United States who got into this band. I often think, boy, I'm probably the only person in Atlanta right now listening to China Crisis. That's probably the truth. But obviously much bigger in England and other places. They had a pretty big song called Wishful Thinking off this one, which was their second record. Again, did nothing here, and not surprising because I think it's about a relationship between two men, and that wasn't gonna fly in 1983. It probably wouldn't fly today on the pop charts, let's be honest. Anyway, so they've got the first four of these that have been released in multi-disc sets. To me, it's an amazing thing that they re-release this stuff at all. Of course, my perspective is of a person living in the United States, and nobody's ever heard this band. They don't know them. They're not familiar with any of it. Maybe the name, might sound, a little familiar to someone, but there are very few fans in the States of this fabulous band. And I just would love to sit here and discuss them for a little bit and talk about what you get if you are thinking of purchasing one of these multi-disc sets. I'm going to go release by release and do a series of 4 videos. I'll talk about overall today what they all are, and then I will specifically go into the debut album, Difficult Shapes and Passive Rhythms. All right, so overall with the series, you get a multi-fold set here with multiple discs and original artwork, and I'll go more into it when we go into this one. Books with information on the songs and how and where they were recorded, all that stuff that we eat up as fans. So the first debut, which is called Difficult Shapes and Passive Rhythms, it's also called Some People Think It's Fun to Entertain. A very long title, again, another thing that probably gave them trouble upon its initial release. It's just not catchy. You just say, what album did you buy by China Crisis? And you gotta read a whole, 3 sentences. So, again, not something that's going to endear them to a lot of people. I always think about that Fiona Apple record called Win the Pawn, which actually has like 74 words in the title. Well, this is kind of similar, and the second one does that as well, where there's kind of an additional, parentheses on the title. Anyway, we'll get into all that in the later videos. So, Difficult Shapes and Passive Rhythms. You have a 2-disc set, of course, the original fabulous release. One of the greatest debut albums ever, in my opinion. Again, it's pretty much solely my opinion, at least in the United States, as so few people actually know what this is. Second disc has demos, 4-track demos, home demos, that kind of stuff. Peppered in some extended mixes that you would have got on their various EPs that were released, and B-sides, and then at the end it's 4 songs that were from a John Peel radio session in early 82, the 4th of January in 82. So right at the beginning of the year, and I think, obviously before this album came out. I'm trying to remember when it came out. I don't remember. I always think albums come out in the fall if they're like moody and dark. I don't remember when this one came out. I'm going to say maybe like the summer of 82. I'd have to check it out. Anyway, moving along to the second release in this series. You get 3 discs here. All right, I'll have to come back to show you all of that. Oh, I pulled one out because I'm just about to listen to it and hear what's on it. Anyway, so you get, again, the nice fold-out cover. 3 discs in this release. This is the second album called Working with Fire and Steel, which was also one of the singles. And then, of course, there's the, the little parentheses at the end, Possible Pop Songs, Volume 2. All right, artists, what can you say? Anyway, so this has the original release on disc 1, disc 2. Again, more demos. Be forewarned, and I'll say it right now, I always get real excited because I'm a songwriter myself. All my songs, I feel, are demos, and so I don't ever bother to go in. Maybe one time I went in with another guy and recorded a few songs on an EP about 10 years ago, spent a little bit of money in his studio, but otherwise everything I do I feel is a work in progress, a demo. And so it's great to hear these early demos and hear how the song started and the different parts and the things that did make it into the song and the things that they cut out, all that stuff. But be forewarned that a lot of China Crisis demos are just instrumentals. That's kind of interesting and at the same time a frustration for me. I would love to hear an early vocal, different lyrics, that kind of stuff. But a lot of these things you're going to hear are, in fact, just the instrumental demo before they put the lyrics on there. I guess that's their writing process. Maybe they do the music first and then they write words and melodies to it, that kind of thing. So early demos, again, extended versions, different mixes, things like that, a couple live things. And then disc 3 here is, I think it's 2 different sessions for John Peel and Kid Jensen. Again, if you're in the States and you don't know, John Peel and Kid Jensen were very well-known disc jockeys in the UK who would break a lot of music, who would get a lot of the music early, and would have these bands come in to do live sessions as well. And the Kid Jensen session is from May of 82. Well, how about that? Not much longer than the John Peel session, which was January of 82. They were already doing May of 82. They were already doing songs from this record. Interesting. I don't know. I guess they zipped it right out. And then a John Peel session from about a year later, when you're looking at this release, January of 83. All right, so maybe they had a few songs or whatever they were working on for the next record, and then they finished it up with the John Peel session in the beginning of 83. Oh wait, there's Kid Jensen from October of 83 as well. So they were probably promoting this record by then and did another session. That's the 3-disc release of Working with Fire and Steel. Third record, produced by Walter Becker, which makes sense. This band always had kind of a Steely Dan, jazzy sort of a vibe. It's hard to compare any band to Steely Dan, and very few bands out there could ever even hope to have the quality of songwriting and musicianship and everything else that encompasses a Steely Dan record. But nonetheless, Walter Becker was interested enough to produce this, and I think he skipped one and produced the 5th record, which we don't have a multiple disc release of yet. Or if we do, it's not a record I like that much, and I don't have it. So I'd have to check and see. I don't think there's been a release of that yet. Anyway, so this is called Flaunt the Imperfection. I just had an imperfection saying the name. Flaunt the Imperfection. I always think of these things of where I was in life and whatever. This was high school for me. I remember sitting at home listening to this, and this was my freshman year of college. I certainly remember that as well. And Flaunt the Imperfection is kind of a more polished, jazzier type effort. Not surprising, because Walter Becker was producing it. Just get 2 discs here on this one. And again, I will break these down in later videos and show you what you get. Pictures of all the EPs that you have to spend all your money on buying because they have extra songs you never heard before. Interviews with the band. This was more of a, well, actually the last record too. They were more of a band set up by that point, as opposed to like 2 guys with extra musicians. And maybe that's like a parallel to Steely Dan as well. 2 guys that are the main writers, musicians in the band, and a revolving cast of characters around that. The two guys are, haven't even mentioned them yet, Gary Daly and Eddie London. Gary Daly, I think, is more of the synth guy and the singer guy, and Eddie London is the guitarist, although I'm sure they both get into synths and writing and that kind of stuff. I think they both sing. They'll sing harmonies. They'll sing the lines together in some songs and then separately on their own. It's kind of hard for me sometimes to tell their voices apart. I mean, they sound very different, but I'm so used to listening to this music, I don't really think about who's singing what or whatever. Anyway, so there you go. That's the third disc, where you get, of course, the original release on the first disc, second disc, very similar stuff, demos, live, extended versions. Another DJ, Janice Long, they did a session with her, it looks like, in March of '85. You get 4 songs from that one. So, similar kind of mix of stuff, interesting stuff, different varied material. Finally, this one I know, I was at Berklee College of Music in Boston, and I think this was around '87. This is, again, 3 discs here for the 4th release. A very polished sounding record, What Price Paradise, a much bigger, more band-focused sound, big drums. This one is produced by Clive Langer and Alan Winstanley, who did a lot of other big 80s records. Again, like I said before, they went back to Becker on the 5th record. What do you get here? What do you get here? Again, another booklet, of course. Lots of nice info. Very small print that my old eyes have a problem seeing now. I will admit, sometimes I don't bother reading these because they're just not printed that well, and the print is very, very small. But anyway, I'm sure there's a lot of great information in there, whatever it happens to say. And your 3 discs here are the original remastered original album, bonus material. You get Japanese bonus tracks, different versions of the song. There's a version of here that was produced by Andy Partridge, Best Kept Secret. I think one of the singles off here, at least in the UK. It sounds exactly the same to the record. I mean, indistinguishable. So not really sure what the deal is with that, or if they put the wrong version on there. I think I remember reading some people thought, oh, they just put the wrong version. There's another version out there that didn't make it on here. A couple 4-track home demos here, 4 4-track home demos here, which is nice. Again, when we get to this record, I think we'll find a lot of these don't have vocals on them. And then a live from '87 concert with a mix of songs from all these records that we're showing you right here. All right, 13 minutes in, and let's finally get into what's on China Crisis's debut record that has been released in a double disc format. It's interesting because it says Caroline Records on here. I'm not sure if you can see that. It's a weird logo. Caroline was like an indie rock record label in the 80s, I thought. I'm trying to think what other things were on Caroline. It seems like a lot of guitar-based bands are on there. Maybe it's from the UK. I'm not sure. In any case, you get the Caroline logo on here and on the disc, so Caroline has something to do with this release. And you get the difficult shapes here, the picture, interviews, some early photos, which are cool, of the band when they're young. This I like. Here's their 4-track deck that they recorded on. Pretty neat. Gary Daly also has some, I think, 4-track demos that he released. I think it's called Luna Landings, and it's a lot of kind of instrumental synth stuff. I've got that CD as well that came out a little while ago. Some live pictures from the marquee, different places. Again, pictures of EPs and things, some of which I own, some of which I don't. This weird picture in the back, which is actually somebody's naked body, I think, and their arms. Always seemed a little strange to me. It's on the regular release as well. And it gives you all the info, when things were recorded, who's on them, that kind of stuff. All right, let's talk briefly about what is on this release. And if you're interested in buying it, would like to know about the extras, I'm going to tell you about that right now. By the way, on Spotify and other places, they have a couple of releases now called demos and extras and things like that. It's not this in this running order, but I think a lot of them, if not all of them, are included. Maybe not all of them, because there's a lot of stuff here, but a lot of the stuff that's on these bonus discs is included in these demos, rarities, releases that they have on Spotify, so you can listen and hear some of this stuff. I'm not sure if it's all there, I don't think it is, but a good portion of it is on there, which, again, for me, is surprising that anything ever comes out about China Crisis. Very quickly, my history with this band is I ran my high school radio station. We used to get a lot of just indie singles. We used to get what was called servicing from Virgin Records, where they would send you the latest and the greatest that nobody else would play, but they thought, hey, maybe a high school radio station will play this stuff. And I think we got a 45 of the song Scream Down at Me. I'm trying to remember. I think maybe that's all that was on that. Maybe it was like an instrumental version or an extended version and a regular version. I think that's all that was on that, but that was enough for me. I love that song. It's such a good song. Did not even make it on the first record, but I'll go into and talk about that song in a second when we run down what is on disc 2 of Difficult Shapes and Passive Rhythms. Again, China Crisis's debut that came out in 82 at some point. I don't remember exactly when. I'm going to say around the summer, but not really sure. All right, song number 1 is called Paula and Patricia. It's a demo. Song not on the first record. It's kind of a repetitive, and I'm going to call it an Asian sounding instrumental. Has something that, sounds like a koto or a Japanese type of instrument. I'm not sure if that's an in-joke. Of course, China Crisis, the name of the band, and none of these people are Asian or Chinese. But in any case, that's what it sounds like to me. It's got kind of a Casio cheesy sounding keyboard on it. It's just an okay demo. Hey, it's cool to have, but nothing special. Number 2 is something called Lowlands. Lowlands has part of the melody of Jean Walks in Fresh Fields, which is the last track on the debut release. It's an instrumental, and this, again, is a slow, moody instrumental that is different, but one of the sections is the same melody as that song, Jean Walks in Fresh Fields, which actually is a really cool song and a really nice way to end this album on an instrumental. Again, I love everything about this first album. I'm not going to talk about the actual album, but it's such a great album. If you don't know it, and if you have stuck with me for 20 minutes in this video, which I highly doubt, but anyway, it's just a great album. Just really good songs. Interesting rhythmic stuff. Of course, there's a lot of drum machines and synths. Really great, like driving bass parts, cool, echoey, chimey, 80s sounding chorus guitars, interesting vocals. It's just, for me, this record's got it all. I could listen to it every day. I'd be just fine. Anyway, number 3 on this is African and White, which of course is one of their early singles. This is called the demo. It really does sound like a 4-track. It sounds like maybe like a hissy cassette that they have de-hissed, and it sounds fine. I just suspect there's a lot of hiss and things that we're not hearing that have been removed in the recording. All the elements of the song are there. The song has a great bass line. I believe that Eddie London did most of the guitars. Gary Daly on the demos did most of the bass parts. Maybe he did them on the debut record too. I don't know. Bass playing is excellent though. I suspect there's like an actual guy who came in who was, an accomplished bass player who played a lot of this stuff. These bass parts are not easy to play, especially when you got into the second record. It's a lot of fretless stuff, a lot of difficult moving active lines, and just one of the great things about China Crisis is a lot of these songs have just really strong bass parts. A lot of 80s music in general had strong bass parts that you just don't hear anymore in pop songs, but don't get me started about that. You don't hear anything in songs anymore. Anyway, it's got that great bass line. I think they both sing the song together like a harmony vocal. Has kind of like a clunky drum machine. It's kind of a low-key version. I don't think the drums actually kick in or are punchy like the second, not the second, but the second version we hear on this record here, which would be track 4. Track 4 is the original extended version of African and White. I think that was on my Virgin import release that I bought probably for a lot of money back in the day. I would find these things. A lot of them I would find at my through my high school radio station. Like what I said, we would get these records for free. I would get into these bands and to go buy the import or whatever that would cost, $12. It was like a lot of money back then, maybe more, who knows. But anyway, I still have that LP to this day, and then I bought it on CD, and now I have once again rebought it on CD again, multiple times, as you do. Anyway, so this is the extended longer version of African and White. That's your number 4 on your disc. The demo kind of translated well to this. Most of the elements, like I said, of that demo, which was track 3, are there. Just the vocals, of course, are more polished, punchier drums, that kind of stuff. African and White is a great song, one of the great songs on the first LP. Number 5 is No More Blue Horizons, which, of course, has a parentheses called Fool, Fool, Fool. This is the extended mix of that. I think this is one of the many EPs that, of course, I had to have. I had to spend my parents' money, not just on the record, but then I had to buy the EPs because they had B-sides and extended mixes and things I hadn't heard before. China Crisis B-sides are very good, by the way, and that's why these are good, solid releases, because the B-sides were just as good as things on the record. They weren't like throwaways or whatever. You'd hear that song and you go, why isn't this on the record? It's just as good as anything else or whatever. Anyway, so has this, again, an active killer moving bass part, the horns. It has that marimba sound that they use that was on a specific, like an ARP synth or something or other. Had this marimba patch, and you'd hear that in a lot of bands' music of the time. Great song, just an extended version of a song on the first record. Number 6. Here's where it gets interesting, because number 6 is actually number 7 on the disc. They screwed up. So number 6, which lists out here as No Ordinary Lover, is actually the song called Watching Over Burning Fields. They mixed up the order. Number 7 is actually where number 6 is supposed to be. You wonder, who's asleep at the wheel doing this? How do you screw up something that big? I mean, sometimes you see typos, or the name of the song got messed up a little or whatever, and these are kind of limited releases. They're going to sell 12 of these in the United States, and a few hundred, maybe a couple thousand, in the UK and across the world. Like I said, it's not going to set the world on fire that a band that was out 40 years ago has released a record that was not very successful to begin with, at least here in the States, not successful at all. But how do you screw up and put the songs in the wrong order? Come on. Nobody just sat for 45 minutes and flipped through this record. I figured it out in 10 seconds. They're in the wrong order. Anyway, so number 6 is actually the song Watching Over Burning Fields. Again, a really good B-side that could have been on the record. It's been on other EPs and things like that. Great song. It's kind of more synth poppy. It has that kind of arpeggio sound you would hear where they would have the root and the octave or whatever. Just a nice, really good, solid song. Could have been on the record. Again, not in the right place on this one. Number 7 is actually the song called No Ordinary Lover. This was on an EP that I bought back in the day. I remember this song. It's a nice song. And this is an instrumental with real echoey, delayed guitar and a little bit of synth on the top. No drums or anything. Nice tune. This is a good kind of B-side additional thing you would find on an EP that you could understand why it's not on the record, but it's still good to hear. All right, number 8, we're going back into songs that are actually in the right order, and this is my favorite. This is Scream Down at Me, number 8. We're there somewhere. Scream Down at Me is, of course, the 45 that I got when I initially heard them. Scream Down at Me is a really great, solid, well-played, interesting song. It's a little different than the stuff on the first release, and maybe that's why it's not on that record. It's got one of the few songs they have with a piano sound. You almost never hear piano on China Crisis, at least earlier you didn't. And just a great aggressive bass part, interesting delayed guitar and stuff, really punchy, up-tempo song. Like I said, it's my favorite. Anything that's on there I'm probably going to buy it. So that's Scream Down at Me. Number 8. Number 9, Greenacre Bay is kind of a strummy, I wrote an accosting song, but that's a typo. It's an acoustic song. It's got like a strummy Spanish, kind of syncopated acoustic song. And nice tune. Again, happy that it's on here. Number 10 is Performing Seals, kind of another mellow instrumental synth woodwind song. Woodwinds on it. Not my favorite, but it's on there. Number 11 is called Cucumber Garden. This was on a release with that Scream Down at Me on another EP. Cucumber Garden's kind of a chunky, disjointed song. I like it, but it's kind of sounds like a band trying to still figure out their sound. Some of the parts are good, some of them are not as great, but it's got some of the elements and kind of not everything you're going to hear on the original release, but still a cool song. I didn't discover that one for a long time, but I like having that. And then you got the 4 John Peel session from the 4th of January 1982. You've got 7 Sports for All, the title track on the initial release. And I've heard a couple demos and earlier versions of this. They're all very different. It was like they were trying to figure out the sounds, how this, the parts went together. So this one here, I believe, since it's January and this record came out in 82, maybe they hadn't even recorded this record yet, or they were in the process of recording it. Translated to a live performance, it's very different. It's got a different feel. It's got more of a live band feel. It's got a part that didn't make it to the first record, an extra little bridge, or they just think it's 1 or 2 chords or something. But again, so it's a work in progress at that point. But great song, great title track, one of my favorites from them. Number 13 is one called This Occupation. Not on the original release. I think maybe there's a studio demo of this out. It's an okay song. Not my favorite. There's not much special about that. Number 14 is a song called Be Suspicious. I don't know anything about this one. It's a slow, moody ballad. It bugs me because it sounds like Color My World by Chicago. There's an arpeggiated piano part. Again, it's early because it's like a piano sound. You never heard that in the band after the early days. And again, not such a great song, but interesting to hear, just, for historical value. And we're getting into a half hour, which is hard to believe. It's almost the length of this record, just talking about what's on these releases. But I want you to know, I want you to, spend your dollars wisely if you're interested in getting one of these China Crisis releases. They're all great. This one finishes out with some people I know to lead fantastic lives. Another great, one of the better songs. They're all great, but another great song on the first record. This is an earlier version. Again, most of it's there. In general, it was pretty brave for these guys who were using a lot of synths and drum machines and that kind of thing to play the stuff live in 82. You got to think about the technology, the fact that synths would go out of tune all the time. This was not all science that, had been perfected by this point. Even like syncing a drum machine and a synth, or maybe they'd use a reel-to-reel and they'd play the drum machine part or whatever. It all had to be synced and matched up, and this was before or in the very, very early days of MIDI. MIDI is a cable you would connect from your drum machine to your synth, and everything would line up in time and match, and you could sequence and put different parts and layer them together and have them all play back at the same time. This was before that. They had different systems that would connect these devices, but they were very primitive, did not work very well at all. So to go on a live, I assume, radio broadcast, maybe these are pre-recorded and they're played later. I always assumed these were live sessions at the time. And to try to play these, get these machines to do what they're supposed to do back in the early days of the 80s, not easy at all. Anyway, wrapping it up because we've gone a half hour here. Hard to believe. This is the initial China Crisis release, the debut record, Difficult Shapes and Passive Rhythms. Many thumbs up. 10 thumbs up. Great release. Great record, of course. Interesting B-sides and additional material. Well worth your time, as they all are, but I just wanted you to know what was on there and what to expect, and now you know. All right. Hopefully I'll follow through and do the other 3. And you can look forward to those. I'll get out before it's a half hour. Uh-oh, too late. Later.